Welcome to Area 2071, a research-driven Metaverse podcast.
Hey everyone, it's George from Area 2071. Area 2071 is a project of Blockchain DXB. In this podcast series of Area 2071, we focus on Metaverse, everything related to Metaverse and NFT. This podcast primarily focuses on education, information, research and news about Metaverse across the globe. We will discuss some latest news, technological innovation and adoption of Metaverse. We will also discuss how cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology merges with Metaverse. Finally, we also focus on Dubai, UAE and Middle East in the world of Metaverse. So, let's kick this thing off. Hello fellow citizens from Metaverse, it's George from Blockchain DXB and today's the 26th of August, and to be honest the cryptocurrency market is not looking good at all. It is pretty much the same since the last 3 days. There is a very high chance that over the weekend or once the Federal Reserve Board announces the inflation numbers and the interest hike, the cryptocurrency market will go below the $1 trillion mark. And if that thing happens, the cryptocurrency platforms linked to NFTs and Metaverse might just not be doing good and it just might go below the $1 trillion mark. Currently, the cryptocurrency platform linked to NFTs and Metaverse platforms are definitely not doing good either. In today's episode, I'm going to very briefly discuss if Meta will dominate the Metaverse industry. Now look, you might not be a fan of Meta or Facebook, but they are an absolute massive giant. And in a recent call earnings with SEC, the numbers that they portrayed may not be accurately being published by mainstream media. One really interesting thing that stands out regarding Meta is that currently they have 3 billion active users. 3 billion active users is a massive number. This is one of the reasons why I do think that Meta can dominate the Metaverse industry. In today's episode, what I'd really want to discuss is if blockchain technology can actually work in the Metaverse. We look at the Blockchain Trilemma situation, that is decentralization or distributed, how I personally like to call it, security and scalability. And I'm going to be sharing my opinion where I particularly do think that blockchain technology may not be ideal in Metaverse and why centralized entities might work better. And this is where Meta also kicks in. I also will be discussing top 5 Metaverse news from around the world and top 5 Metaverse news from Dubai, UAE and Middle East. Finally, I'm also going to be talking about the Metaverse Everything sponsorship. Now look, if you are a business person and are keen to sponsoring this particular episode, I definitely would love to connect with you. And I'll be sharing in the contact details, so please feel free to get in touch with me. We are going to kickstart today's episode by looking at the price of cryptocurrencies that are linked to Metaverse platforms. So we'll be looking at the price of ApeCoin, Decentraland, Sandbox, Axie Infinity, Theta Network. We'll also be exploring the market cap and the 24-hour trading volume, which in all honesty is not looking good at all. 2022 has not been the best year for Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and definitely not good for Metaverse platforms either. So let's kickstart today's episode. Welcome everyone, it's A-Team here in Dubai, and you're listening to Metaverse Everything podcast, where we solely focus on Metaverse. We cover top 5 Metaverse news from around the world and top 5 Metaverse news from Dubai. And Metaverse Everything podcast is a research-driven podcast focusing on educational and informational content about Metaverse and its impact. And remember guys, Monday to Thursdays, we have Crypto and Coffee at 8, where we cover top news and information pertaining to Bitcoin, blockchain, beyond blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, DeFi and Metaverse. And how the series of episodes on the Crypto and Coffee at 8 works is, we usually cover some top news and information pertaining to the price of cryptocurrencies, some major breaking news, occasionally short and sweet news as well. News that has an impact in the cryptocurrency world. The other 2 news and information is related to Dubai, UAE and Middle East from the cryptocurrency world. So let's kickstart today's episode. Today is the 25th of August and I'm looking at the price via CoinMarketCap at 5 a.m. Gulf Standard Time. ApeCoin is currently at $5.28 and it is down by 2.48%, and since the last 7 days it is down by 6.92%. Decentraland or Mana is currently at 0.83 cents, and to be honest, it has been the same price for almost 3 months now. Now, since the last 24 hours, it is down by 0.52%, and since the last 7 days, it's down by 7.46%. The Sandbox or Sand is $1.04. Since the last 24 hours, it is down by 1.14%. Over a period of 7 days, it's down by 7.60%. Axie Infinity is currently at $14.70. Since the last 24 hours, it is marginally up by 0.54%, and since the last 7 days, it is up by 6.06%. Theta Network or Theta is currently at $1.22. Since the last 24 hours, it is up by 4.11%, and since the last 7 days, it is up by 0.18%. If you look at the market cap, it has gone down a lot, especially in the last 7 days. It's gone down by roughly around $500 million. Now, currently, the market cap of Metaverse platforms that are linked to cryptocurrency is $12.5 billion, and the 24-hour trading volume is ridiculously low. It's only $1.5 billion. So guys, let's kickstart today's episode. The first thing what I'd like to talk about is Meta's dominance in the Metaverse industry. Now look guys, despite what you hear about Meta in mainstream media, especially in Facebook posts, you'd be under the impression that Meta may not dominate the Metaverse industry. I've been looking at posts via LinkedIn where they're absolutely thrashing Meta. This is exactly what Meta wants. They want their name to be publicized all over the world. As much as we dislike Meta or Facebook, Meta will dominate the Metaverse industry. What I would really urge you guys to do is, Joe Rogan has a podcast with Mark Zuckerberg. As a matter of fact, it just got released a couple of hours ago. Listen to the entire episode. It is almost 3 hours long. Mark Zuckerberg also has a brilliant episode with Lex Friedman. Personally, I used to not be a fan of Mark Zuckerberg. The moment you listen just to the first 10 minutes of his interview with Lex Friedman, you truly understand what he's talking about. That being said, Facebook or Meta is politically aligned to left wing, and that is something which I personally don't like. Ideally, social media platforms need to be apolitical. But he gives explanation on why certain things are banned, why certain things are blocked, and there is very little where Mark Zuckerberg individually can do about it. So what I would strongly recommend is listen to his entire podcast with Joe Rogan, listen to his entire podcast with Lex Friedman. Now let's get back to how Meta will dominate the Metaverse industry. Now so far as research and development is concerned, Meta is investing roughly $10 billion, and they're investing this only on the VR headsets. $10 billion only on VR headsets. That is a ridiculously huge amount. If you do want to find out more information, go through the MetaQuest YouTube channel. They often provide detailed updates so far as the VR headset is concerned. One of the goals of Mark Zuckerberg and Meta is to release a virtual reality headset in approximately 5 years down the line, which will be as light as using sunglasses, and the price that they want to target is $100. If you are businesses dealing in Metaverse, $100 giving to your customers will be a ridiculously low amount if you're offering services and if you're charging subscription services. I think that is something which can be really worked upon. The second thing that I'd like to talk about so far as Meta is concerned, regarding other flagships that they have, like WhatsApp or Instagram, they have the ability to go ahead and transition these users into Meta, and that is a massive deal. Apart from that, Meta is in a position, the moment they have any competitor, they can directly buy, acquire, or take over them. Now, there are certain rules and regulations of what Meta can buy or acquire, but Meta can even indirectly acquire these companies. The third thing that I'd like to talk about is Meta is an early adopter in Metaverse. The moment Facebook changed its name from Facebook to Meta, the SEC inquiries so far as the ETF is concerned was almost 20x times more since November of last year. And Meta, being an early adopter with the number of active users, can easily transition to Metaverse. The fourth thing is something which I particularly don't like is political alignment. As much as we want to be apolitical, Facebook or Meta is definitely leaning towards left wing. So the big question that I'd like to ask you guys is, and I really want you to think over this, does the government control the social media such as Meta, Instagram, TikTok, or does the media control the government? Facebook, they do have fact checkers, but the fact checkers are once again politically aligned to CNN, which is once again a left-wing organization. But they do have a very strong support so far as the politics is concerned. They are able to manipulate information. As a matter of fact, while I was just preparing for this podcast, I was just reading through a post where Facebook or Meta is trying to manipulate the whole 9/11 situation, but that's again a completely different topic. So these are core areas why Meta is in a position to dominate the metaverse. Apart from that, if you're talking about having a metaverse platform which is going to be distributed, let's say in the near future or maybe in the next couple of years or decades, there is a platform which aims to have a completely distributed metaverse platform. Meta is in a position where they can buy more tokens, giving them more rights. Now they can do that directly or indirectly. So even having a distributed metaverse platform, Meta can still be a market leader. They can also get governing rights. One thing which Mark Zuckerberg often talks about in his interview with Alex Friedman is the idea of having a hybrid metaverse. So there will be certain areas in metaverse which will be centralized, and he talks about the benefits of having centralization. Now, what I think so far as the hybrid metaverse is concerned, the payment aspects is where you can implement blockchain protocols. One question that I think often is, can stable coins be used in a metaverse platforms? Central bank digital currencies, personally, I think are a better option than cryptocurrencies as a medium of exchange in the metaverse. Now, Meta has competitive advantage over blockchain protocols. It has 3 billion active users. It is currently investing heavily in VR headsets. They are in the technology industry, so Facebook or Meta does know the technology in detail. And if you guys follow Mark Zuckerberg on Instagram, he's just released a post where one of his colleagues is actually 3D printing a couple of things. So Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and Meta are the technology experts so far as the tech industry is concerned, and they do have the world's best developers. The biggest competitive advantage which I think Meta has is they will be in a position to offer better services, and more importantly, they can even offer these services for free. So keeping all these things in mind, Meta will dominate the metaverse industry, and they could very well have a strong monopoly. Now let's talk about the blockchain trilemma problem in the metaverse. Now the blockchain trilemma problem is decentralization or distributed, security and scalability. So the whole idea of blockchain trilemma is that it's nearly impossible to achieve all three things without compromising on one of them. So let's look at decentralized or distributed, how I like to call it. Is it possible in the next coming years or decades to have a fully distributed platform? I honestly don't think so. A hybrid metaverse is something which I particularly envision. The areas where blockchain ideally fits in is only the payment system. NFTs is also an area, but if you look at the volume of transactions that will be happening in metaverse, I really am not sure if distributed platforms are ready. One thing which I talked about in a couple of weeks episode is Lightning Network in metaverse. That could be one option, but even Lightning Network is at an early stage, and if Lightning Network is working at its optimum, it'll still be able to only transact 1 million transactions per second. This is a ridiculously low number because when you talk about metaverse, it is an entire industry. So imagine millions of people logging into metaverse, millions of people doing chat or conversation, social media. I do think that 1 million transactions per second is a ridiculously low number. So the distributed or decentralization of aspects will still be a problem. Can a centralized entity solve that? Definitely yes. They can have different servers at different locations, and they will be better able to manage and manipulate the decentralization aspect of it. Let's look at security. Now listen guys, blockchain does offer if not one of the best security, but it is this particular feature that would not be ideal in metaverse. Simple things like, what if the username or private key is hacked? What happens then? Everything, your connection with metaverse is completely gone. Immutability, which is one of the biggest feature and the security of blockchain, can also have negative consequences. What if there is fake news, abuse, or child pornography which is uploaded in Metaverse? The immutability aspect makes sure that fake news and incorrect information stays in the Metaverse platform forever. So there is ideally some kind of compromise that needs to be done, either in security or distributed or decentralization. And finally, the third point is scalability. Once again, scaling Metaverse platforms will require a much higher transaction per second output. And you also need to take into consideration that there will be multiple Metaverse platforms, not just one. There will also be interoperability, keeping all the gaming industry, which will be moving into Metaverse, all the social media companies moving into Metaverse. I definitely do think scalability will be a problem. Now, what do you guys think? Drop them in the comments below. Will the blockchain trilemma problem of decentralization, or distributed, how I like to call it, security and scalability will be an issue in the Metaverse as well? Apart from that, open blockchain will still have problems in Metaverse. Things like decision making. One thing you need to know is open blockchain does have really poor decision making. You need to get the entire community, the entire consensus. Look at Bitcoin's updates. It takes usually months, even years to go ahead and make any update. So the decision making is extremely slow. In case of centralized system, the decision making can literally be done overnight. The decision making does lead to often chaos. It does lead to a lot of fights. And to be honest, some of the great ideas can be easily forgotten. Open blockchain also does lead to maximalism. If you look at the conflicts between Bitcoin maximalists and everything else, the conflict is absolutely devastating. It could have conflicts with other projects and members. And because of maximalism in the Metaverse, it could also be possible that it creates a lack of openness to new ideas and suggestions, which eventually does lead to centralization. So all the maximalists get together and they form a centralized entity. So are Bitcoin maximalists in a way centralized? That is something you definitely want to think over it. Lack of innovation in comparison to centralized entity. Having an open blockchain in Metaverse sounds brilliant, but it would have limited time for innovation. The fact is, centralized entities can literally go and innovate, update, and get things ready for the customers absolutely immediately. The other drawback is, let's say in an open blockchain in Metaverse, if there are any innovations, a centralized entity can easily identify it, hire those developers, and get it implemented absolutely ASAP. Open blockchain has terrible user experience. No matter what you say, the benefits of open blockchain such as Bitcoin, the user experience is absolutely terrible. Updates takes months, if not years, to take in. Another aspect, guys, if you've been following Larry Fink and BlackRock, read through his letter. He's severely calling for deglobalization, but an open blockchain will still under the ethos of think globally and act locally. So I really am not sure what the next coming months, years, and decades will have so far as deglobalization is concerned. And finally, one point which I always make regarding blockchain in general, centralized protocols can do a much better job so far as the time is concerned, so far as the cost is concerned, and so far as the quality is concerned. Now, so far as the cost is concerned, when you look at Bitcoin transactions, definitely, yes, you can make millions, if not billions, of dollars worth of transaction for a couple of cents. But if you look at blockchain protocols, the classic example I can think of is the Stepin app, where you still have to pay $600 just to get started. And in yesterday's podcast, I talked about a Murmur app, which was a replication of Twitter in blockchain protocol, but the initial cost to set up your account would take somewhere between $3 to $10. At the same time, centralized services can offer all of these services completely for free. If you're thinking about permission or centralized blockchain, that is absolutely no use. The other word for permission or centralized blockchain is a centralized software, because a centralized permission blockchain does not solve the double spend problem. Now let's guys look at the top 5 news from around the world, and I'll quickly run through it. The first news is about Mark Zuckerberg. Now what happened a few days ago was Mark Zuckerberg had a selfie of him and he published it on his Facebook post, on Instagram post, and pretty much everyone were thrashing Mark Zuckerberg, talking about the image quality. So what Mark Zuckerberg did is on his Instagram post, he did actually mention that the whole idea of him putting that image was only to showcase what Metaverse is. But there is a possibility that Mark Zuckerberg will overhaul Metaverse app horizon because he did receive a lot of criticism. Again, this news made so much of headlines, and if you think of it, that is exactly what Meta or Facebook wants. He wants people to talk about it, because if you've been following Meta's journey in the Metaverse, they are aiming at 5 years down the line. They anticipate virtual reality to maybe even take over mobile phone in 5 years from now. The next news is about Ready Player Me. So Metaverse startup called Ready Player Me has raised $56 million in Series B funding led by Andreessen Horowitz. Now this is absolutely huge. Andreessen Horowitz are, if not one of the biggest investors in cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and now Metaverse, and the funding will be used to scale the cross-platform Metaverse avatar system. So follow Ready Player Me, loads and loads of useful information, and they've mentioned in the article where a lot of the funding will be used to hire developers and working in different platforms. So definitely brilliant news. The third news is also to do with investment. So there's a company called Invesco. So the global asset management firm Invesco has launched an investment fund focusing on all things Metaverse. So the Invesco Metaverse Fund will focus on what the firm calls at Metaverse value chain. So brilliant news. The fourth news is about MTV Awards. And this is something which I covered a couple of weeks ago. But the MTV Awards does actually take place this Sunday at 8 p.m. The news regarding Metaverse is Snoop Dogg and Eminem are planning to bring the Bored Ape NFTs to the VMA Awards in the Other Side Metaverse platforms. So it'd be really interesting, cool, and at the same time weird to see Snoop Dogg and Eminem performing at the VMA Awards in the Metaverse platform. And if you want to find out who are the nominees, I think there is BTS, there is Blackpink, and I'm pretty much sure there are a couple of other artists who have been nominated in the Metaverse category. So this might be the very first time that MTV is having an award in the Metaverse category. The fifth news is something which I touched upon earlier, is about Mark Zuckerberg's interview with Joe Rogan. So Mark Zuckerberg has a 3-hour-long interview with Joe Rogan, and he actually talks to Joe Rogan how running Facebook sucks and why Metaverse is much better. So really interesting talk on virtual reality, and he's also talked about the vision for Metaverse. What I would really strongly recommend you guys to do is listen to the Lex Friedman interview first, then listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Now let's talk about top 5 Metaverse news from Dubai. The first news that I'd like to talk about is for Emirati Women's Day. So Wolf, which is an app, is partnering for Emirati Women's Day with Dubai's future florist called as Bliss Flower Boutique. And what they plan to do is they plan to personalize charms to the Metaverse. So Wolf is particularly female friendly because it offers a safe space for women to express themselves without being concerned about the unfair judgment, because Wolf gives its users the ability to create their own virtual worlds while communicating as their avatar. So definitely brilliant move. Now Bliss has stepped into the Metaverse headfirst and is collaborating with Wolf, and it'll be the brand's first venture into the 3-dimensional virtual realm. Now to be honest, I personally haven't tried that, but I'm definitely going to have a look at that. So Wolf is an app. Now with both brands committed to continuously innovating and offering the best to the customers, the platform will introduce 2 bouquets as charms, and this is going to be only in the Metaverse. So one of them is called as Mixed Berry Smoothie, and the second one is Red Apple Pomegranate. So the Bliss charms will represent sustainability in keeping with this year's Emirati Women's Day theme of inspiring reality, sustainable future. Now the cost for that I believe is only 59 cents. I'm not sure if you need to pay only using cryptocurrencies, but I'm definitely going to check this out immediately after recording this podcast. The next news is about one of the OGs from Dubai who's in the Metaverse news quite a lot, and he has a platform called as SEQ Soup. So the news is that he is launching a salesman for Metaverse called as Burj Meta. So SECQ comes up with a salesperson avatar for Metaverse called as Mr. Muskie, billed as being the world's first Meta salesperson. So the key person behind this project is Kishore Dharmarajan. He's very active on LinkedIn, and he's often a speaker at the Astrolabs, and he does post a lot of things on LinkedIn, but definitely brilliant news. So Dubai will have the world's first Meta salesperson. The next news is about my podcast called as Blockchain DXB Metaverse Everything. What I plan to do is from next month onwards, I plan to release a weekly interview only on Metaverse with local startups and businesses in the Metaverse industry. And I also plan to interview experts and governments, entities. The whole idea is that to identify what is Dubai doing in order to be the number one region in the city and top 10 city in the world so far as Metaverse is concerned. And later on in the episode, I'll also be discussing some sponsorship opportunities. So we at Blockchain DXB, we have two podcasts. One is Crypto and Coffee at 8, which is Monday to Thursdays, where we talk everything about cryptocurrencies. And this one is Metaverse Everything, where we discuss everything about Metaverse. The fourth news is about a real estate company called Square Yards. The news is that Square Yards launches 3D Metaverse platform for Dubai real estate, and they're using cutting-edge technologies such as 3D, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and augmented reality, and the platform is first of its kind to introduce high-definition 3D maps. And Square Yards is India's largest integrated platform for real estate and mortgages, and one of the fastest growing property tech platforms in UAE and rest of the Middle East. And Square Yards aims to work with developers in Dubai to integrate the upcoming launches into the ecosystem so that customers can buy, rent, and sell properties digitally. So definitely unique idea. Now they do have strong competitors like Damac, who's investing $100 million in digital property. Now Square Yards also has aggressive plans to launch this product in other markets such as in India and soon in Australia as well. The fifth news what I'd like to talk about is the Dubai Metaverse Assembly. Now this is if not one of the biggest events taking place in Dubai, highlighting Dubai Metaverse strategy as well. Hamad Al-Shirawi, who's the director of projects for Dubai Future Foundation, has put up an article which says there's immense demand for the governments, private companies, technology startups, innovators in Web3 locally and internationally. So if you are into Metaverse industry, there's a massive event taking place at the Museum of the Future, and this is organized by Dubai Metaverse Assembly, which is a part of Dubai Metaverse strategy. Now listen guys, if you do want to find out more information about Dubai Metaverse strategy, I have a standalone episode where I talk everything about Dubai Metaverse strategy. I'll put that in the show notes below as well. And finally, what I'd like to talk about is sponsorship for this podcast. Now listen guys, I'm currently actively looking for sponsors. If you do want to sponsor this podcast, drop me an email to info@blockchaindxb.com or info@area2071.com. And I also have another podcast called as Rise in OCR Podcast, which talks everything about obstacle course race. So if you're into fitness, if you're into running, that is the podcast that you need to listen to. Apart from that, I also have 6 to 8 events, mostly to do with Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and the audience is local and international. If you follow me on LinkedIn, put up my post every day, Monday to Fridays. Monday to Thursdays is about cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and Fridays is everything about Metaverse. And on LinkedIn, I also have audio events which I tend to do 3 to 4 times a month. So if you are a sponsor, I will be promoting your product, your company, your business in each of these things. But if you do want to find out more, drop me an email to info@blockchaindxb.com or info@area2071.com. I would definitely be seeking to work with you guys. So that's all for today, guys, on the Metaverse Everything podcast. If you do have any feedback or suggestions, drop me an email to info@blockchaindxb.com or info@area2071.com. If you like listening to this, please follow this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and share the word across. And remember, Monday to Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m., we have Crypto and Coffee at 8, where we cover top news and information pertaining to Bitcoin, blockchain, beyond blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, DeFi, and Metaverse. And this is followed by 2 news and information related to Dubai, UAE and Middle East in the world of Bitcoin, blockchain, beyond blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, DeFi, and Metaverse. And what you're listening to is the Metaverse Everything podcast, where we talk everything about Metaverse. So thanks so much for listening, guys, and have a brilliant weekend ahead. Bye-bye.